GETTER just may be the most interesting man in EDM, except he's not really even in EDM anymore because he's now a successful rapper known as Terror Reid. But simply summarizing his journey as an EDM producer turned rapper doesn't do him any justice, as he has ventured far outside of both of those lanes. He has also starred in a movie and TV series with the real bros of Simi, Vally, and he also owns his own clothing brand and was even a viral Vine star at one point. But even that doesn't summarize how deep this man's lore goes, so be sure to stick around as we uncover GETTER's wild journey in the music industry, all of his side quests, and why he decided to leave EDM to become Terror Reid.
What's up, this is Tanner, aka GETTER.
Tanner Patullo was born in San Jose, California in 1993. His parents exposed him to a lot of music growing up, as his dad was a deadhead and his mom showed him rappers like Ludacris, Eminem, and Mac Dre, which caused him to fall in love with hip-hop, and he even dressed up as Eminem for Halloween in 4th grade. He also has an uncle who plays in some bands in Las Vegas who actually taught him how to play a few different songs on the guitar at a young age. Some of his other hobbies as a kid were building Legos, cooking, and organizing things, which is a pretty random hobby for a kid if you ask me, but that blossomed into a love for interior design later on. He said that he was pretty lazy as a kid, so his dad actually paid him $30 a week to be on his school's cross-country team. Once it was time for high school, his friends were zoned for a different school than him, so his dad lied about their address so that he could go to school with his friends. However, he got caught pretty quickly and was expelled, forcing him to go to a different high school. During high school, he played in a few different metal bands called Demira, Silence of the Oppression, and the Boogaloo Swamp Ride, and he was holding down a job at Arby's during those band days.
Arby's, we have the meat.
Around that time, one of his friends introduced him to EDM, but he wasn't a fan and he thought that the rave scene was lame. But then some of his friends from the new high school showed him dubstep, which would change the trajectory of his life moving forward.
Started DJing when I was probably about 16. I got a little Vestax DJ controller for Christmas. I just got it started with that, learned how to beat match, did all that shit, upgraded to CDJs. Then I really wanted to get into producing because DJing just wasn't enough for me, so I got Reason 4 from a friend just for free. He hooked it up. I went on YouTube, searched some shit.
He came up with the name GETTER when he was 15 or 16, but he had also considered using other names like Sputnik, Trashmaster, and DJ Mags. When he was deciding which name to go with, he wrote all of these names on his bedroom wall in Sharpie so that he could look at them every day and see which one that he liked the best, which his dad wasn't very happy about. As a side note, he mentioned in a recent podcast that Oliver Tree was the one who taught him how to DJ, and he taught Oliver how to produce, so they've been friends for a very long time.
But no, yeah, Oliver, me and him actually, we didn't grow up together, but we were, he taught me how to DJ and I taught him how to produce lightweight a little bit. And then we literally got started at the same time.
I'll be talking more about their relationship later, as GETTER did some work with Oliver before the Oliver Tree project was ever started. It's also worth mentioning that he has been friends with Sneak for a very long time. And for those that don't know, Sneak used to go by Slosh and is also one half of Space Rangers, whose song called The Move was featured in the iPhone 14 Pro commercial.
What's the move?
Anyways, by the time that GETTER was 17, he had already started to play shows.
I got in with these guys named Vital out of the Bay Area, and they did all the big shows. They were the only people doing them, so I was lucky enough to get with them. And they would put me up opening for people, which was cool. But I mean, my shows that I would play were 2 fucking people at a roller rink or something. But it was money. I had money in my pocket. I was pretty balling in high school from that.
Once he graduated high school, he attended community college and got a job at a smoke shop while still playing shows, but he was eventually fired because of the schedule conflict with his shows. While he was attending college, he usually skipped class and wasn't feeling very committed to the college path. So he decided to drop out, then buy a 2001 Volkswagen Jetta, pack up all of his stuff, and move to Los Angeles to pursue music further, as he was already making decent money from shows by that point. He was able to get his name out there pretty quickly through his productions, landing releases early on with some major dubstep labels like Firepower and Rotten Recordings. Around that time, he befriended Nick Coletti, who was big on the now-defunct platform known as Vine. He helped GETTER grow his social media presence, as they would make a lot of silly Vines together, though none of them ever did crazy numbers on Vine. However, things started to rapidly change for GETTER in 2015 due to a few different factors. He landed his first Alsala release with the Allegiance EP, which features the track called Head Splitter, which became his most popular song at the time.
I made this song Head Splitter, and I made it in like 3 hours, like a work in progress version. And there's this thread, like an email thread that a bunch of DJs are on, and you basically, when you're done with the song, you send it, and so everybody has it, so everybody plays your shit out. And so I put it on there, and then Skrillex hit me. He like hit me back, and he was like, "Yo, this is tight. We should put this out on my record label."
And did you know him before that at all?
I met him a few times, like, you know, I'd open for him, just meet him, whatever, like here and there. I loved his old band from First to Last. Was so sick.
The Allegiance EP also features the first hip-hop track that he ever produced, called Genocide, featuring Don Faro. He also signed with a new manager around this time, and the manager started posting all of GETTER's Vine videos on Facebook, which caused the original Suh Dude video to go viral. The whole Suh Dude thing was a massive cultural phenomenon in 2015 and 2016. Like, I cannot overstate how big this really was. It was actually so big that GETTER was more well known as the Suh Dude guy than he was as GETTER, the dubstep producer. It was a pretty frustrating position for him to be in as a producer, but it still benefited his artist career to a degree just by getting his name out there.
What's the Suh Dude thing?
That's hard.
Dude,
that
is
confused me.
That is
for
the
a while.
dumbest thing that ever popped off for either one of us. You want to know why? And it was because we would say that shit on a daily basis because it's stupid. It's just like, Suh Dude. It came from like,
But what's with like tucking in the lips? Like the way you're saying it is so weird.
dude, it was all just dumb shit that we like. It went from like "What's up, dude" to "Sup, dude" to "Suh Dude."
Yeah.
And now it's "Suh," like just noises and like. But no, it was literally. They're just like our brains doing dumb shit together.
How much do you think Vine has had an impact on your music?
So much. Like not even the music, just like the career and the brand and everything. Like, and it's all thanks to Nick. I swear to God, everything.
He also made sure to cash in on the virality by starting his own clothing brand called Trippy Burger to sell Suh Dude t-shirts, which were even being sold in Zoomies. The name Trippy Burger was inspired from the Head Splitter music video. Between his newfound viral fame and a strong discography of music for fans to dig into, his career skyrocketed in 2016, landing him huge gigs like Ultra, Shambhala, and Electric Zoo. Now, to be clear, this virality didn't make his career, so to speak, as he already had a following before the Suh Dude fame, but it certainly took things to a new level. To capitalize on his biggest year yet, he had some major releases in 2016, like his second Alsala release, the Radical Dude EP, which featured one of his biggest tracks of the time, Rip and Dip, plus Blood, which is probably my favorite track on the EP. It also featured a song with Oliver Tree called Forget It, which was released before Oliver Tree had officially launched his own project. At the time, Oliver Tree just went by the name Tree, but the feature was later changed to Oliver Tree. Watching Oliver Tree's rise over the years from the perspective of a longtime GETTER fan has been one of the craziest things, because at one point Oliver Tree was just some guy that was frequently posted on GETTER's Snapchat stories and vlogs acting goofy and riding a Razor scooter. But now he's a huge artist with over 10 million listeners on Spotify. The Radical Dude EP also features a collab with GETTER's longtime friend Sneak, who I mentioned earlier in the video. GETTER also further capitalized on the Suh Dude virality in 2016 when he released a track called Suh Dude, tying his music brand to the viral videos. He also released the What the Frick EP that year, which in retrospect is a very interesting release when we look at it through a modern lens, knowing that GETTER is now a rapper, plus all of the stuff that went down with the Visceral album. The EP features a hip-hop track with Suicide Boys, plus the track called Something New, which was basically GETTER testing out the Visceral style of music 2 years before the Visceral album dropped. GETTER also produced the track Hunted Hunted for Puya and Fat Nick that year, and the process of making that track, as well as the collab with the Suicide Boys, is what led to the birth of Terror Reid.
And then, yeah, working with them and seeing how they worked. I remember working with Puya and Suicide Boys at this like shitty ass studio off Satakoy in fucking North Hills, like bum as fuck. And like seeing the way they were like I made the beat and just looped it, and I'm just sitting there, and they're like, and I'm like, damn, that's actually like I could fucking do that shit. You know what I mean? So like that's when I really started to kind of fuck around with it. And then Uppercuts was actually the first one I wrote.
At the end of 2016, Getter released a music video with Filthy Frank and Nick Coletti called Hood Rich, which as far as I'm aware is the first time that Getter ever publicly rapped on a track.
I'm just an EDM dude on cam with the pink man and Coletti.
Also, for those that don't know, Filthy Frank was probably one of the most unhinged YouTubers of all time, who later transitioned into music, as you may know him by the name Joji. All in all, 2016 was undoubtedly Getter's biggest year yet, but things were about to get shaken up the following year. In 2017, Getter launched his new record label and clothing brand called Shred Collective, and he released his first single as Terror Reid on the label called Uppercuts, which is actually still his biggest track to date. It came as a huge shock because an EDM producer deciding to start rapping sounds like a recipe for disaster, but Terror Reid is actually insanely good. My taste in rap is pretty time-stamped these days, as I don't really listen to much new rap, but I used to listen to a ton of rap when I was younger, with my older brother showing me all sorts of underground mixtapes. So the era of rap that I was used to was very clever and poetic, and that style seemed to fade out of popularity over time. But then here comes Terror Reid out of nowhere with some of the most mental bars of the late 2010s. To me, his music sounds very old school, and it's very reminiscent of Cypress Hill, with boom bap beats and lyrics that are provocative and insane while being incredibly clever. Originally, the Terror Reid project was just something he was doing for fun on the side, and he used to wear a ski mask to keep it separate from the Getter project, but he decided to stop using the mask later on. I also want to mention that in a 2012 interview, he said that he sees himself making hip-hop in 5 years, which is exactly how it unfolded, as Terror Reid launched 5 years after that interview.
In 5 years, I probably see myself still making music, but maybe more along the lines of like hip-hop.
He continued to release singles as Getter in 2017 while working on his debut Getter album, Visceral, but this is when things got interesting. He went on a Twitter rant saying that he planned to leave EDM once the album was finished, with the most notable tweet saying, "I'm going to make this the most memorable album of all time, then dip the fuck out. Leave my last mark, fuck all this shit." So clearly, he was already fed up with EDM a couple years before the whole Visceral tour debacle, and he was already starting to explore other avenues like producing for rappers, releasing under Terror Reid, as well as his involvement in the Real Bros of Simi Vally, which also debuted in 2017. For anyone who doesn't know, the Real Bros of Simi Vally is basically a YouTube spoof of reality TV in which viewers follow the lives of 4 fictional burnouts who grew up in Simi Valley and never left. Getter shows off his acting skills while playing a character named Bryce Meyer, and the show generated its own fan base, adding yet another random thing that Getter is known for outside of his music.
What was that, Hawk? What'd you say?
Bryce, he didn't say anything.
Because it sounded to me like you're talking.
The show went for a total of 3 seasons, and they also released a full-length movie this year, which I'll circle back to later on. As for the rest of 2017, the Terror Reid singles quickly began to stack up, releasing a total of 5 Terror Reid tracks while only releasing 4 as Getter. In 2018, he only released 1 standalone single as Getter, plus a Getter collab with Space Laces, and 1 single as Terror Reid, because he had bigger things coming later in the year with the release of his debut Getter album, Visceral. Visceral released in late 2018 on Mousetrap and received mixed reviews, with some fans loving it and other fans wishing it sounded more like the old Getter. I personally loved this album, and revisiting it 6 years later, you can just tell how far ahead of its time it was, which in a way is actually a bit of a curse. If we compare it to other electronic albums released in 2018, I would argue that it's one of the best albums of the year, if not the best, with its only real competition being G Jones' album The Ineffable Truth or Rez's Certain Kind of Magic. To be clear, I'm not comparing it to albums like Solace from Rufus to Soul or Sanholo's Album 1, because those are just in different lanes. Regardless of how great of an album it is, a lot of fans felt alienated as they were probably expecting an album full of rip and dip-esque tracks, but instead they were met with a more ethereal and melodic, yet experimental album. Getting pigeonholed isn't something that I would think any artist would want to deal with, and that's exactly what happened to GETTER, with many fans outright dismissing an incredible album because it just didn't sound the way that they expected it to. I mean, just go listen to that first drop on Part of Me, and imagine if Skrillex was the one who released that. Skrillex fans would be glazing so hard over this whole album if it was released by Skrillex instead of GETTER. It's such a fascinating phenomenon because it received so much hate, but also has a fan base who holds it in high regard, and the cheapest you can get a Visceral vinyl for is $300. GETTER's decision to produce this style of music didn't come out of the blue either, because as I mentioned earlier, his track Something New from the What the Frick EP would fit right in with Visceral. He also said in a 2016 interview at Electric Forest that Flume was his dream collaborator, and Flume's style fits much better with Visceral than it does with GETTER's earlier work. Now, here is where things really started to go south: the Visceral tour. The tour kicked off in early 2019, and tickets sold well. However, many fans were disappointed to be hearing this new style of GETTER music rather than the more abrasive dubstep that they originally fell in love with. Some fans were extremely disrespectful on multiple of the tour stops, booing GETTER on stage and even throwing things at him. This really weighed on GETTER's mental health, as he was so excited about this album and showing off this new direction, only to get met with extreme backlash. Ultimately, he decided to cancel the final 7 stops on the tour because of this. It's really sad to see the way that this all unfolded, as he was outspoken about how passionate he was about the album when he appeared on the No Jumper podcast for the second time in 2018.
You know when you wake up and you're just depressed and you don't get it because you're like, what the fuck?
Right.
Like, I got money, I'm doing what I want to do, and you're still just like, what the fuck is going on? Well, I learned that when I put that energy into making music, I feel better.
Really?
So that's what this whole album is. It's fucking great. It's really good. It's the first thing that I've made in a while where I'm like proud of that shit.
It's also ironic that the first time he went on No Jumper in 2015, years before Visceral, he talked about the type of fans who only want you to ever make one kind of music.
It was like I was doing one kind of music and I had one type of fan, and like they're the dubstep fans that are like 14, 15 years old, and any fucking dubstep DJ or producer can agree with me on this, but like if you make anything except for what they like, or so like if they really like a certain kind of music and you make that and they love you, and then you make one that's different, they will fucking tear you apart.
It's worth mentioning that during the Visceral tour, he performed encores as Terror Reid, which just showed that he was beginning to step further into that role. As I mentioned earlier, GETTER had expressed his discontentment with the EDM industry multiple times before the Visceral tour debacle, so I think it was clear that he was on his way out anyways, but the way the tour unfolded just made things worse. But regardless, he continued to play festivals as GETTER for a while, and he did continue to release music under GETTER after Visceral, but it eventually came to a stop in 2021, and we'll talk a little bit about his final releases in just a bit. So anyways, he didn't make a hard exit from GETTER, but I think after the Visceral tour was when he really started to go all in on Terror Reid. Moving forward in 2019, he continued to pump out Terror Reid singles, and in 2020, he released his debut Terror Reid album called Hot Vodka. That same year, he released his next to last body of work as GETTER, the Napalm EP, which featured some absolute head knockers like ADHD and Represent. Unfortunately, the EP was likely too experimental, so it didn't do as well as some of his previous work. 1 year later, in 2021, he released his final body of work under the GETTER project, an EP called Some Creature. This one is absolutely nuts, with many of the tracks really pushing the envelope on bass music, but unfortunately, it was somewhat overlooked. Going back to my point about how his music may have been received differently if it was released by a different artist, I think that that's valid in the case of the Some Creatures EP as well. Go listen to the track called With No Eyes, and imagine Sudden Death playing this during one of his Void sets. It fits perfectly and would be adored by fans of Void. I think that one of GETTER's biggest challenges was that he always wanted to push his music far outside of the box, bringing something fresh and experimental, which is a great way to attract hardcore fans seeking out a product that only you can provide, but it's probably not great for attracting a wide audience. And I'm not even saying that attracting a wide audience should be the goal, but within dance music, there's certainly a delicate balance between pushing boundaries and maintaining commercial viability, and an artist has to decide where they want to be on that spectrum. The majority of dance music is very formulaic, with each artist adding their own bits of personal touch and variation, but Getter was determined to completely carve his own path solely for the sake of expressing his own creativity with no regard for commercial success, which is an admirable quality. So anyways, with his final Getter release behind him, he went all in on Terror Reid, releasing a slew of singles as well as his second album in 2023. He also started playing a bunch of shows as Terror Reid in 2022 and has continued to do so ever since, playing some of the biggest stages in hip-hop like Rolling Loud. He now has 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify and just dropped his third album called Manifesto. It's safe to say that by this point in time, he has fully stepped into his role as Terror Reid and will continue to grow the project moving forward. Aside from all the music stuff, The Real Bros of Simi Vally movie dropped this year, receiving a solid 7.1 on IMDb, and it's honestly super dumb, but I think that's kind of the point, and I highly recommend watching it if you're a fan of Terror Reid or Getter.
Oh, snap. Hey, Bryce, I didn't even see you there.
And you either chief this thing down, or it's official that you don't burn.
Is that good for you? These fools, dude. I'm saying we jack the truck, replace the sound system, get a better one, paint it matte black, and then it's your truck. And they don't have one for the reunion. Problem solved.
There's even a scene towards the end where he shows up to his high school reunion wearing a Terror Reid shirt, so that's a fun little Easter egg.
Okay, I'm going inside.
Yeah, I need a monster.
Anyways, as far as the Getter project goes, I guess it technically isn't officially over, as the most recent set he played was on New Year's Eve at Decadence, Arizona at the end of 2023, but I definitely wouldn't bank on much activity from Getter moving forward. Getter has had a wild trajectory as a public figure, from dubstep stardom to internet virality to becoming a skilled rapper and even having some acting chops. It's been fun to see everything that he's gotten himself into over the years, and it's clear he's just an insanely creative guy looking to express himself in as many ways as possible. He has not only shown extreme range and diversity in music, but really just in entertainment in general, and I'm excited to see what he has in store moving forward because I'm sure there's going to be new surprises along the way. And as for his departure from EDM, I think the story is often unjustly summarized as him being upset with the Visceral tour and he decided to quit. But in reality, it's clear that he was losing his passion for electronic music well before he ever released Visceral, as he creates for the sake of creation, not monetary or commercial incentives. He's made it clear in the past that he's a music lover in general and loves a wide variety of genres, so I wouldn't even be surprised if he dabbles in a totally new genre or artistic endeavor at some point in the future. Even if you aren't a fan of every single thing that he's done over the years, it's hard to deny how exciting it has been to watch him explore various outlets, never sticking with one thing too long and letting it go stale. Getter has left his mark on the world of electronic music, and we'll always be able to revisit his work whenever we want, but for now, it's time for Terror Reid to shine.
I want to be that guy who made every kind of music and made beats for everyone, and I just want to be the shit. I want to be like, yo, I just want to be a legend. I want to be Jimi Hendrix. I want to be fucking Flying Lotus. I want to be all these guys that made an imprint and you will never forget them, because people forget EDM artists real quick. Because I've been there. I've been doing this shit 8 years. I know.
Dude, there's this guy on Twitter that has that Getter, and he just posts porn.
What?
And I'll be playing a festival, and the festival will tag him, and then people are like, "Why are you booking this weird fucking?" And I've literally messaged him like, "Fool, I'll pay you $10,000. Just give me this at."
How many followers does he have?
Like 500.
Oh, well, then
really?
Twitter.
Oh, wow. I've tried for 3 years. They're like, well, because their rule is like, we can do it and we can get it for you, but they need to be inactive for 4 months. And this fool logs in like 3.5 months, and he'll just be like,
Gangbang. Clip of a gangbang, and then he'll bounce for a little bit. It's so stupid.
I like the apple bottom jeans song. Apple bottom jeans, motherfucking boots with the motherfucking fur.